Hello students. In this third video for week 2 of the course, I want to talk to you some about the questions of a worldview, the big life questions or big picture questions that make up a person's worldview. But before I do that, I remembered from the last video when I was talking about a justification for the course, I forgot to read you something from a leading philosopher who was a college professor, world-renowned for his philosophy, and he was also an atheist, Richard Rorty, the late Richard Rorty, renowned philosopher, who, when speaking about issues of religious belief, and especially Christian belief, had this to say. And I want to read you this quote. It's an astonishing quote. I want to read it to you to underscore the importance of knowing our worldview and understanding the threat of other worldviews that are out there. And then I'll get into the questions of a worldview, how we're going to look at them in the class. Here's what Richard Rorty said. We try to arrange things so that students who enter as bigoted, homophobic, religious fundamentalists will leave college with views more like our own. The fundamentalist parents of our fundamentalist students think that the entire American liberal establishment is engaged in a conspiracy. These parents have a point. Their point is that we liberal teachers no more feel in a symmetrical communication situation when we talk with bigots than do kindergarten teachers talking with their students. When we American college teachers encounter religious fundamentalists, we do not consider the possibility of reformulating our own practices of justification so as to give more weight to the authority of the Christian scriptures. Instead, we do our best to convince these students of the benefits of secularization. So we are going to go right on trying to discredit you in the eyes of your children, trying to strip your fundamentalist religious community of dignity, trying to make your views seem silly rather than discussable. We are not so inclusivist as to tolerate intolerance such as yours. I think those students are lucky to find themselves under the benevolent Herrschaft, which is a German word for dominating rule, of people like me, and to have escaped the grip of their frightening, vicious, dangerous parents. It's hard to believe. World-renowned professor and philosopher would speak so blatantly about his and many others' efforts to remove the Christian faith from college students in the universities of America. That's from his book, Universality and Truth, a book on Richard Rorty and his critics is what it's called. It's a book by Robert Brandom, and the name again of that book is Universality and Truth. That is astonishing to hear what he said. Now, there's one point I want to mention about his comments there. He talked about Christian fundamentalists, and he is specifically referring, he referred to the Bible believer as a Christian and the Christian scriptures, so he definitely was on the attack against the Christian scriptures. But there's a difference between a Bible-believing evangelical and a Christian fundamentalist. And when he says fundamentalist, he would mean more of a certain brand of American Christian fundamentalism that tends to be very antagonistic and almost seems that it exists to set itself up against other kinds of people and other belief systems and things. And so I would say to that while we certainly understand that there are enemy belief systems that are out to get people and remove their faith, we don't view other people and other belief systems, the people, as enemies, or their lives or their families. We would identify ideas and certain other beliefs as enemies. And so I just want to make that comment there, that qualifier, that there are problems with Americanized Christian fundamentalism. But from Richard Rorty, he's really going after all Bible-believing people. People who would take the Bible, the gospel, literally. He was on the attack, and he's representative of many others. So that was just to underscore the importance. Now, about the questions that constitute a worldview, Philip Ryken, in your textbook, he gives, I believe it's 7 questions on page 20. And you will find that there are a number of ways to shape the questions that constitute a person's worldview. And different Christian thinkers and philosophers, and they're not all Christians, have their own set of questions. I've seen, I think, as few as 3 and as many as 8 or 9. Read a number of books on worldviews. And what we're going to do is we are going to package all of these different readings I've done, including Riken, into 5 core questions of a worldview. And one of the things that helped me do that was by identifying the main themes of a worldview. And there are 5 main themes in a person's worldview. And this is not just in Christianity. This would be generally how people live their lives. They make decisions and they look at themselves, they look at other people, and they look at the world based on these 5 themes. And from these themes, I will then give you the questions. Theme number 1 is origin and creation, where everything comes from, beliefs about where everything comes from. Theme number 2 is meaning and purpose, having to do with the value and purpose of life and human beings. Theme number 3 is morality, or how we know right and wrong, or right from wrong. This has to do with ethics and what is truly good in life. What makes something good and what is good. And the 4th theme is fixing a broken world. You will find in people's worldviews, whether they would say they admit they have a worldview or not, especially in a postmodern time, worldviews have to do with established belief systems. And postmodern generations, which would be my generation and your generation, would say, I don't like worldviews, but the fact of the matter is people live their lives based on certain fundamental beliefs about themselves and others, and that's a worldview. And all worldviews have beliefs about how to fix things that have gone wrong in the world and things that are wrong with people. Issues of hate, hurt, war, sickness, and death. Everyone recognizes, at least everyone, brokenness, and they answer the question of how it can be corrected. Can the world and can people and can cultures be saved and restored? And really it's a question of salvation. And the 5th theme is the topic of death and destiny. Issues and questions about the destination of our lives when we die and after we die. Having to do with our ultimate purpose and the end of history of humankind and the cosmos. Is there an end? And is there a purpose? Is there some kind of destiny to the cosmos and to humankind and to history? So from those 5 themes, here are the 5 core questions. It would be good for you to write these down. You're going to have them in your personal worldview essay paper, your first paper. The 5 core worldview questions that we're going to look at as a way of examining the Christian worldview, how it will answer. I'm not going to do that in this video. How the Christian worldview answers these questions, and then how the other leading competitors or other dominant worldviews in the world today answer these 5 questions once we get into that. The first question is, where did everything come from? And it's the theme of origin. Where did everything come from? Similar questions that philosophers recognize people live by and ask are, what is reality? Is there a God? Does God even matter? Where did everything come from? And really you come down to 2 basic possibilities, 2 possible answers. You either see God as the originator of everything, or you see chance. And those that look at chance, I say chance with a capital C, God or chance. And the source of the answer to that question is either what you believe is truth. Some worldviews, questions, analysis of worldviews have questions about how do you know what is true and what is real. But our source of truth will help us answer that question. Do we have a book of creation, which certainly Christianity does, as well as other religions? Do we believe in revelation, that there is some kind of special revelation on that information? Or is there some other source offering a total picture of reality, which for many is nothing more and nothing less than science. So the second question is, what am I here for? And it's the theme of meaning and identity. What am I here for? Similar questions are, who am I? Does my life have meaning? Am I important and valued? Am I loved? Jeff Myers identifies this as the very core of what worldview is about and why we should be concerned about it and see it as important, is because the human heart cries out for and longs for love. And so he sees this second question, Jeff Myers, as the most important. Am I loved? What am I here for? Some of the possible answers that are out there in other worldview systems are, you are here by chance and you are an accident of nature and you simply need to survive and reproduce, or you are valued by others for the benefit you bring to society and mutuality. And that would be very much a socialist position, which is very popular with the postmodern worldview and the secular humanist view. Your purpose in life, your sense of meaning and your identity, and the answer to the question of what you're here for has to do with how you fit in society. And that would be the ultimate answer of socialism. That's where your value and worth comes from. What a terrible, terrible foundation for value and worth that is. Or you were actually created for love. You were actually made to be loved. That's one of the answers that's out there. And you were made not just to be loved, but to glorify God and to fulfill his good, and I underline good, purposes in this life and in the life to come. And the source of answers to that question, what am I here for? There are three possible sources. We look to nature and science as our answer, the naturalist and secular humanist worldview. We look to culture and what we make of ourselves and what we can think of ourselves, and that would really move towards socialism and the postmodern worldview, but secular humanism would be in there. Or we look to a source that we would consider as sacred information, like revelation and religious books. And I'm just speaking, kind of stepping back from our particular Christian view to say, how do you look at this? One of the sources is the sacred. And the Christian worldview would certainly be in the sacred option there, that we have received special revelation, special information that sheds light and turns the light on to give us the answers to these questions. The third question is, what is right and wrong? The theme of morality and ethics. Reichen covers this on pages 53 to 60. What is right and wrong? Similar questions that philosophers give are, how do we know what is truly good? And who determines what is right and wrong? The question of authority, because right and wrong has to do with looking at things and situations from a base of authority. And whose voice is the authoritative voice on what is right or wrong? Is it my voice, my own authority, in my own self, independent of other people? Or is it society and my surrounding culture? Is that the authority for what is right and wrong, so that I just have to say I know what is right and wrong by the laws of my land? Or is there some other objective source of right and wrong that should be imposed upon me and my society? An outside source of determining right and wrong. And so the possible answers are whatever a society determines is good or bad. That is how you know what is good or bad or right or wrong. Or whatever a person determines, the individualist, secular humanist perspective. Whatever a religious belief system determines. And that would have to do with the sacred run. That the sacred text of faith gives revelation and sheds light on matters of right and wrong. And I would say that each of those should be tested to see where that line of thinking and where that kind of philosophy leads. What is the outcome in a society if it is based on one of those three things? What society determines what is right and wrong, if they're the ultimate authority, or if a person is the ultimate authority, the individual, apart from anyone else, or if there is a religious source of right and wrong, and that is how we know. I think we should test those and see what the results of the Christian view of right and wrong are. And we will look at that later on in the second part of the course where we move into ethics and morality. And so the fourth question, just got two more here. The fourth question is, what went wrong with the world and how can it be fixed? It is the theme of how to heal a broken world. Similar questions are, why is the world so full of hate, hurt, war, sickness, and death? Why can't people just get along with one another and be kind? Why am I broken? And people look at themselves and they understand, I have things that are wrong with me. I hurt, I struggle, and I know I have caused others to hurt. And the world is full of hurt and brokenness. So what is the matter with the world and how do we fix it? Possible answers are that the source of this problem and the way to fix it is a lack of education. People just need to be educated. We know that when people are educated, that generally a society improves and people behave in better ways. So perhaps that's the ultimate answer to save the world. Or it is because of political error, and politics are the answer to the problems of the world. You would certainly believe that that is the message of most of the media and the news outlets, that politics are the answer to the world's problems. Or a suppressed inner goodness, that all people are ultimately good, and it has been suppressed in us because of the pressures of survival. And what we need to do is receive moral teachings and education and learn how to overcome our animal instincts by becoming more sophisticated. And finally, one of the possible ways to answer the question of what is wrong with the world and how can it be fixed is that what is wrong with the world is sin and moral and spiritual depravity. And the answer to those problems are a spiritual healing and salvation from that depravity through a religious belief system. And finally, the fifth question that we're going to use in shaping our examination of a worldview is, where will it all end? The theme of death and ultimate destiny. Similar questions. Where are we going in history? Is history headed somewhere predetermined? Or do we just kind of go on until the universe the battery runs out, the battery on the universe dies? What will happen to me after I die? People ask that question in themselves. It is a source of great anxiety in human beings. What's next? Is there a life after death? Is there something about me that will go on after I die? And possible answers are, the secular humanist view and the postmodern view would be, after death, where you are headed, ultimately your destiny is to return to dust in the earth with no conscious life. Or many will give the answer, I simply don't know, we can't know that, science can't know that, and therefore we shouldn't worry about it. But the fact of the matter is that the human heart longs for answers, and we know innately, inwardly, that there is something about us that is more than just the physical, and there is a greater realm in our lives. And people ask this question, what's going to happen to me when I die? Or possible answer is that there is something eternal about us that will go on. And the religious answer, and again, I'm speaking in the way of like stepping back and looking at this as an observer, is that there will be judgment of human beings, and there will either be glory or damnation received based on one's relationship to God in issues of right and wrong. And the Christian worldview, of course, is that ultimately we are headed in Christ towards what Philip Ryken calls a repristination. I love that word, a repristination of ourselves and of creation, and we'll talk about that a bit more when we look at the Christian worldview specifically. So these 5 questions are the ultimate foundation of what a worldview is and how people live their lives. And people are looking for answers to them, and they are living out of answers to those questions, even if they are not consciously aware of or able to define how they're answering them. This is really how people live their lives. They go on based on what they believe about these things. and this is their worldview. Okay, well, that'll be all for now, and I look forward to connecting with you next time.